Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thanks for joining me as we spend the next hour together. I do hope you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. Coming up tonight, attorney Mark Harris, a partner to the Ben Crump law firm, joins me to discuss the latest developments in the Breonna Taylor grand jury case. Also, Dr. Benjamin Chavis comes on tonight to talk about Joe Biden's op-ed column that appears in the Black Press USA. And then the award-winning Shelby Steele, the conservative from Stanford University, talks about race relations in this country and also discusses his latest film, What Killed Michael Brown. All that and more coming up tonight. But first, my opening observations. Never, ever let go of your dream. No matter how hard it gets, you keep on trying. Scripture tells us we are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, struck down, but not abandoned or destroyed. Yeah, we're going through some tough times right now because of COVID-19 and all the other issues that we're confronted with, but keep on pursuing your goals and your dream. It might be deferred, but it won't be denied if you keep on working hard at it. And those are my opening observations. So the breaking news out of Louisville, Kentucky, with regards to the grand jury that's been following the case of Breonna Taylor is that the jurors have been released now to come forward with their statements. And so far, the statements are quite damning in the fact that the Kentucky Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, did not answer their questions as he said they did in terms of putting all of the evidence on the table. Joining me now is attorney Mark Harris, who is a partner with the Ben Crump law firm. And it's good of you to join us, Mark. This is really quite revealing. A lot of people suspected this from the outside looking in. And now that we're hearing from the jurors inside the grand jury, what is this something you expected? And where do we go from here?
You know, it's extraordinary. Usually grand jurors in the grand jury process is ensconced in secrecy, a shroud of secrecy. It's not supposed to be open to the general public. This is extraordinary for the judge in Louisville to decide to open that process up. I think there's been enough credible criticism. There were a number of steps here that are just wrong in terms of the process, culminating in the Attorney General Daniel Cameron making the decision to not even let the grand jurors consider homicide charges to be brought against the officers. The fact that he wouldn't even let them consider that is the end of this story relative to the grand jury process. But the whole process, from the no-knock warrant to the delivery of that warrant to the shooting indiscriminately into the apartment, all of that process was wrong, to letting Breonna Taylor lie in her apartment for 5 minutes before medical services were provided to her. She bled out. Her boyfriend was the one who had to call 911 from the apartment, Mr. Walker. This is a bad set of facts.
The other matter that's rising up right now is one of the police officers who was in that room, Detective Mattingly, has spoken now publicly about this to Michael Strahan of ABC News. And his information is not congruent with what the people on the ground heard the night of that no-knock warrant being served and them going into the apartment.
There's so many inconsistencies with this thing. The public deserves, first and foremost, Breonna Taylor's family deserves the truth. The citizens of the city of Louisville, Kentucky deserve the truth. The residents of the Commonwealth of Kentucky deserve the truth, as do the rest of us throughout this country. So let's pursue the truth here. There were inconsistencies in the documents that were presented to the court to get the warrant in the first place. There is a back and forth as to whether or not the no-knock warrant was even in place at the time it was served. In other words, there are some who say, and it's still to be proven, that the no-knock warrant was withdrawn, which meant that the cops had to come in and announce themselves as police officers. There seems to be up to 1.5 minutes of them banging on the door by their statement. What Mr. Walker said is, I heard banging, but no one identified themselves as law enforcement. I thought it was Breonna's former boyfriend trying to get in. This is just a sea of inconsistencies and lies. What should have happened, and what should happen in every state, Kelly, is officers ought to be required to videotape anything like this. Anytime there is the potential threat of deadly force use, it should be on videotape.
From your standpoint, the fact that the Ben Crump law firm has been handling this in terms of representing the family,
Mhm.
the family's response to the police officer Mattingly, what have they stated about his statements publicly now? Because I was actually quite surprised that he came forward to reveal his side of the story. And remember, this is the officer who also sent a message to the Louisville Metro Police Department the day before the announcement of the grand jury's findings was revealed.
I have to defer to the lead attorney on this case, of course, Attorney Ben Crump. He's the one who's in direct contact with Breonna Taylor's family, and he's advising the family. So far, has done an amazing job of advising the family. As you know, Kelly, and your viewers know, there was a civil process that culminated in the payment of the authorization of the payment of $12 million to Breonna Taylor's family. And now what we're talking about is these inconsistencies and potential improprieties in the criminal justice system. So up to this point, the family has been amazing. I mean, I just couldn't be that classy and that elegant in terms of how they've expressed their grief relative to the premature taking of Breonna. I assume they'll continue to be that way. At a point, it's up to law enforcement to step their game up. Maybe Mr. Cameron, Attorney General Cameron, needs to be removed as the special prosecutor here. And there needs to be a new independent, objective special prosecutor put in this case so that justice will be done.
Now, Mark, that raises an interesting dilemma, a potential dilemma, if you will, because John Mattingly, the officer there who spoke to Michael Strahan this morning on ABC, and the rest of that report will again appear tonight, where we'll see the full information that's coming forward. Can that public statement or those statements that he's made be held against him if a new grand jury is convened and they find him liable and charge him or raise the charges against him in this particular case?
Absolutely. The Constitution of the United States prevents someone from double jeopardy. Double jeopardy refers to someone who's gone all the way through a criminal prosecution, was found not guilty, not having those same charges brought against that person. That's not the case we're talking about here. In this situation, we have an incomplete criminal process. We have an incomplete investigation, if you will. We have a grand jury that was prevented from even considering whether this officer, former officer, and the other officers behaved inappropriately. So if I were him or his lawyer, I would probably watch what I'd say. I don't know why he went on Michael Strahan's show, other than the fact that a lot of these folks think that they're above the law. And if you think you're above the law, you think you can say and do anything with no consequence. The arrogance of that, the arrogance associated with basically taking a victory lap over Breonna Taylor's death, is just something that's well beyond my ability to comprehend.
Yeah, and to your point, I winced when he started going into an explanation of George Floyd and victimizing George Floyd, saying that he wasn't a model citizen and that he died of an overdose, and it was unfair and those guys should be charged. And I winced. I noticed that other people winced, including Robin Roberts and Michael Strahan and George Stephanopoulos. I mean, I think every person who saw George Floyd probably winced and had some emotional response to what Mattingly said in describing that murder that we witnessed taking place with George Floyd.
One of the things that Mattingly said along the lines of what you're describing now, Kelly, which was very disturbing, was him saying, after all, in our situation, nobody put a knee to her neck. Whoa. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. And unfortunately, it evidences a bad way of policing. It, again, is no longer an example of one rotten apple. Maybe the whole orchard of the Louisville Police Department is problematic. And clearly, if that's the attitude of this one former law enforcement official, we can only imagine what the rest of the Louisville Police Department is thinking, what their processes are. I mean, let's go back to the beginning again. This was a middle of the night warrant served ostensibly not for Breonna Taylor or Mr. Walker, her current boyfriend, but was to find evidence, so-called evidence of drug dealing that they were accusing her former boyfriend, who did not live at the residence. They had him already under custody by the time Breonna Taylor was killed. This is ridiculous. And I think Madeline's statements yesterday on Good Morning America ought to be given some strict scrutiny in terms of whether or not further charges ought to be brought against he and his colleagues.
We'll continue to follow the case. Obviously, it's not over, and justice is still being sought after in the case of Breonna Taylor. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with attorney Mark Harris. That's next. Let's talk about what lies ahead for the American people, regardless of who wins the presidential election.
I'm going to tell you, Kelly, one of the things that my family's dealing with right now is making our plans for the holidays. And one of the things that, of course, the kids have asked about, my mother-in-law has asked about, is there any way we can structure Thanksgiving to have the traditional Thanksgiving that we're used to? We've thought about holding it outside. In California, we can get away with that. We've thought about small little segmented areas within our home. We are blessed to have a large enough home where we could have small little gathering groups. And the bottom line is we can't do any of it. I think we all have to look ourselves in the mirror and understand it's not just about us, but it's about everyone else. And this is a situation that's going to require further lockdown. Europe is already showing us that their numbers are off the chart. People have been acting this summer and early fall as though the all clear has been sounded. Yeah. And the price is going to be paid, sadly, I believe, in the late fall, throughout the winter, and through the early spring. I think the lockdowns are coming back.
Well, your concerns are legitimate. On Monday, on this show, we talked to a doctor from Johns Hopkins University, which of course has been tracking everything and predicting what's likely to come. And to your point, he stated that we have to be extremely careful throughout the holidays and how we have to really safeguard our families and each other throughout the holidays. And he also stated that lockdowns are perhaps something that may be imminent. Of course, it's become political fodder for President Trump, who has criticized former Vice President Joe Biden on the fact that Joe Biden would likely go with the science and say we might have to go through another lockdown, as we've seen taking place in Europe. And Europe is doing it now out of a hard lesson learned. They were doing well, and now their cases are surging once more.
And what nobody wants to say, Kelly, and unfortunately, as an economist, I have to say it, economics is the study of scarcity. I don't think many people really understand that. It's the study of scarcity. What's in short supply right now is leadership and courage. And I'm not talking about in Washington, D.C. I'm talking about in each of our own homes. I have seen, as you have, countless stories of people bemoan the fact that with the coronavirus upticks, it could mean the end of their job or their business. It could be it could have a significant impact on their economics. And I completely appreciate that. But I'm just going to tell you and your viewers where I'm coming from. Give me faith, give me health. I'll take those over just about everything else. I'll figure out a way to rebound if I'm still here healthy, living, and still able to be a person of faith. That's where I'm coming from. Yeah. And I know in some ways it's convenient for me to be able to do so from the luxury and comfort of my home. But the reality of the circumstance is those people who say, I have a tough choice, my business, my income to take care of my family, or my health and my life, that's not a hard call for me. Give me my health and my life. I'll figure the rest of it out eventually. We're going to see the numbers will get so big on those who are afflicted with this horrific virus and the deaths associated with it. Is it going to take fear? Is it going to take people running in the streets, not able to get into hospitals before they'll finally admit and acknowledge what we know to be the case? I hope not.
Mark Harris, appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have some concerns and some immediate concerns that we have to address. And certainly what you've talked about is very fundamental.
Mm,
People have got to get real. This virus is not going anywhere
No,
unless we do something to mitigate uh, this virus and flatten the curve. And we don't even hear that anymore.
no.
Do not hear that terminology anymore. We've got to flatten the curve. And yeah, I think your urgent message is that we do that. So the campaign is hot and heavy, 2 weeks away from Election Day. 28 million people have voted already. Dr. Benjamin Chavis, who is the president of the NNPA, the National Newspapers Publishers Association, and the Black Press USA, joins me now to talk about the campaign and what we expect to see in the coming 2 weeks. Also, Joe Biden, Ben, actually put something into the Black Press USA. He put an
Yes.
op-ed in there. Tell me about it and how striking this is and how forward-thinking it is.
Well, thank you very much, and always glad to be on the Kelly Wright Show. And best regards to everyone there at the Black News Channel. We are just a few days now away from the most consequential election in our lifetime, the 2020 elections. And as you've said, almost 30 million Americans have already voted and are voting. A lot of states have early voting, and that process is underway. The Supreme Court just ruled yesterday, I'm sure you heard, that Pennsylvania will be able to count all of the mail-in ballots. There was an effort by Republicans in Pennsylvania to say if your ballot does not arrive by election day, it won't be counted. Supreme Court disagreed. So I think that there are efforts still across the country to suppress the vote, particularly Black votes, in these so-called battleground states. But I would say that all 50 states are the battleground states. I think that, yes, there are some key states, but this election is going to be an electoral college vote election, but it's also going to be a popular vote election. And I think that that's why both candidates, President Trump and Vice President Biden, are on the campaign trail. But there's something significant happened within the last 24 hours. Vice President Biden addressed a exclusive pinned op-ed to Black America via the Black Press of America, blackpressusa.com. You can go there and see it in its full detail. It's really lengthy. Normally our op-eds are around 800 words, sometimes 900 words. This is a 1,200 word op-ed, exclusively written by Vice President Joe Biden to Black America. And it's startling at the beginning. He admits what no other presidential candidate is willing to admit on the record during the campaign. There is systemic racism in America. He says there's a crisis, there's a problem. He was very upfront. Quite frankly, I thought that was bold on his part.
It was.
Most candidates by now, 2 weeks before the election, are trying to get to the middle. They're not trying to address anything that pointillity, that specific, that references what Black Americans always know, that America has a race problem. And one of the reasons why the race problem continues, Kelly, is because we're in a state of denial. So I thought Biden's boldness by stating upfront, yes, there's a problem with systemic racism, there's a problem of discrimination. And then he goes on to address what he would do as president to lift every voice in Black America. You know, the national anthem is Lift Every Voice and Sing. So the title of his op-ed, Biden's plan to lift every voice in Black America, I think is very telling.
Absolutely. And I commend the Black press for having this come to them. This is a living document that, like you said, will go down in history. And it's the first time that a presidential candidate and a former vice president has been so bold as to actually address this. And we've got two white men running for the country, and they want to govern the country and lead the country. It's important that both of these men reach out to all Americans, particularly the Black community. Dr. Chavis, I'd like you to stay with me on the other side of the break. We'll talk about the contrast between Joe Biden and the fact that President Donald Trump never wrote a op-ed for the Black Press USA. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the program. I'm talking to my good friend, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. He is the CEO and president of the NNPA, that's the National Newspapers Publishers Association, the Black Press USA, making some history this week because of Joe Biden, who, of course, is the Democratic presidential nominee, along with his running mate, Kamala Harris, Senator Kamala Harris. They are both vying for the highest office in the land. And Joe Biden did something that no other candidate has done in the past, and that is he wrote an op-ed in his own words about the systemic racial divide that exists in this country, and he penned it and put it into the Black Press USA. Dr. Benjamin Chavis is here with me to discuss this. And the contrast is that he did it. Where is the message from President Donald Trump? Is he going to write one? Is he going to address? And is he going to admit that systemic racial issues do exist?
Very good questions, Kelly. And first, I know we're on the record. I want to be accurate. We did hear from the Republican, the RNC, and the Trump campaign weeks ago that he wanted to pen a letter, a message to Black America, an op-ed. But as of this date, nothing has been received. They've gone radio silence on us. If they do pen something, because the NNPA, we're nonpartisan, the National Newspaper Publishers Association, and we represent all of Black America, Black Democrats, Black Republicans, Black Independents. But as of today, President Trump has not submitted a special message to Black America through the Black press. We're waiting, but it has not happened. And I think that what we wanted to do, I wanted to get both of them and publish both of them at the same time. Okay. But because we are less than 2 weeks away now from the election, the Black press made a decision yesterday that we're going to publish Vice President Biden's op-ed because it was timely, it was on time, and it was newsworthy. So we put it out, and if there are any Republicans, Black or white, watching this morning, which I'm sure they are, or this afternoon, when you broadcast, Kelly, I think that they still have an opportunity, actually some responsibility. At both across both sides of the aisle, they talk about the importance of the Black vote, but it's what you do. It's what is your messaging to Black America? Are you flying all over the country, having these big rallies? But what are you addressing specifically to Black America?
To your point that you made earlier, the president's team reached out to you and said that he would be writing an op-ed, and now they've gone radio silence. Yet they were not radio silent on an Ice Cube and the contract with Black America. They put him on blast. You know Ice Cube. I interviewed him last week. He went through a lot, has been going through a lot of criticism for being able to talk to both sides, which is on the surface and beneath the surface is the right thing to do. It's just that the Trump people jumped on that, took some of his statements or his proposals in the contract with America and adopted into their platinum plan. What do you say about that controversy over Ice Cube?
Well, first of all, I know Ice Cube personally. The National Newspaper Publishers Association gave Ice Cube our Artist of the Century Award in July of this year. He's a great leader, visionary, creative genius. And I thought that the Republicans were trying to take what Ice Cube did and is doing out of context. Ice Cube is basically saying that, look, whoever becomes the next president, they need to deal with Black America, and they need to deal with Black America on Black America's terms. So I respect Ice Cube for his initiatives. The thing is that they were taken out of context, and particularly on social media, I've been watching. I think a lot of people were rushing to judgment and questioning Ice Cube's motives. But it's interesting to me, it's not Ice Cube's motives that should be questioned. It is how what he was attempting to do has been misportrayed, particularly by those who unmasked him. On the words, I'll use that term. He was put out there as if he was trying to have some secret negotiations with President Trump for his own personal wealth building. And that was not the case at all. But again, I think if there's any October surprise in 2020, Kelly, it is not what Ice Cube did or did not do. It is not what is happening or not happening with all these police brutality cases. I think the October surprise is that there is no surprise.
Dr. Benjamin Chavis, head of the National Newspapers Publishers Association, the Black Press USA. Appreciate you being on, man.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless. We'll be back with more after this. And welcome back to the program. Joining me now is Shelby Steele. He is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University, and he specializes in the study of race relations, multiculturalism, and affirmative action. Now, he just recently released his new documentary, What Killed Michael Brown, which explores race and violence in the United States. It was directed by his son, Eli Steele, and the film goes on to examine the race relations in America and the reactions of the deaths of young Black men, such as Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. But before we start there, I've got to ask you, as you look at the current landscape in terms of what's happening in America with regards to race and the fact that it's front and center in the presidential campaign and will be tomorrow night taking center stage with the debate between President Donald Trump and his challenger, former Vice President Joe Biden. Where do we stand, in your opinion, in terms of racial understanding and coming together as a people?
I think on one level, since the 1960s and all the civil rights victories, that the United States of America has made since then, in this past 60 years, has evolved morally more than any other society in human history in a time frame like that. We have become a different America than the one I grew up in, which was segregated, and Jim Crow segregation everywhere. On my side of the street was all Black, across the street was all white. 20 years passed, we never spoke. It's a different country today. It's not to say that it's perfect, that all racism is gone, but boy, have we made progress. Blacks today are now free in ways we never were before. We can do pretty much anything we want to do. Freedom, I think, much more than racism, is our problem, it's our opportunity, but that's our challenge. That's what we have to learn to deal with and put to service in our interest.
You know, I love the way you state that freedom is our challenge, but freedom is something that we had fought for so many years, especially during the civil rights era. You talked about growing up in segregated America. I seem to recall those days in my younger years of seeing some segregation and seeing Dr. King talk about "I Have a Dream." Would you say the civil rights struggles of the 50s and 60s were different than what we see today, or are there some parallels?
The struggles of what we saw in the 50s and the 60s was a truly authentic social movement that overcame 4 centuries of entrenched, racism that wasn't just some sort of evil we dealt with. Racism was the social norm. I mean, it was who we were. It took a long time, obviously, a civil war, and to finally overcome that. The 50s and 60s was sort of the finishing moment where we came out for the first time in public and protested and said, we won't retreat. And America understood why. America was not in denial by that time. and so great progress is made. The problem with protests today, it seems to me, is that we've already won that fight. We've already made that point in America. There's nothing much to protest about. It's not about protest did for us as a people pretty much everything it can do. There isn't much it can do. And so when I see all the protests that go on today, where they're sort of claiming to be a continuation of that noble protest of the 50s and 60s, there's pathos in that. There's a sad kind of lostness and not knowing, not understanding that protest is over with. And so the protest today is a kind of mimicry of the great protest of the past. A sort of attempt to steal the thunder from the past and say, well, we're noble like they are. No, you're not. You don't face the enemy they faced. Thank God. You face a new challenge, what to do in freedom.
You know, Over My Shoulder is a book by Nelson Mandela about the struggles that he went through. 27 years in prison because of apartheid. And he fought against it. He acknowledged that he initially fought against it the wrong way, and then he learned the right way. And he endured 27 years of imprisonment. And when he came out with forgiveness for the past, and then began to sit down at the table of brotherhood and broker deals, and received a lot of criticism for doing that. But he never saw himself as a victim, but as a victor. And as a result of that, he became the leader of South Africa. And one of the things that he says that has always struck me to the core, he said that education is the gateway out of poverty. And you were just talking about the fact that we must not fall behind in terms of educating our children. So also Over My Shoulder is a Black History 365 curriculum, a book that's about the accomplishments and contributions and the struggles that Black Americans have endured in this country. What were the struggles that you were exposed to while growing up in America? And now that you've achieved education, known throughout this country as one of the foremost Black conservatives, and yet you're not afraid to talk to liberals or independents or anybody, as long as you can get them to have a seat at the table to move America forward and establish a more perfect union.
Well, I was born in the south side of Chicago. My parents were met and married in the civil rights movement in the 1940s. They were founding members of CORE, Congress of Racial Equality. So I grew up in the movement. I was a CORE baby, what they called a CORE baby back then. My family was completely absorbed in that struggle. And my mother organized the parents in the neighborhood. They boycotted our segregated school. It was all Black. It was a white school in the same district, all white. We boycotted that school and got rid of the superintendent, the principal, several teachers, and so forth. So my life was sort of started. By the time I got to high school, I was a little bored with all that. But that's when the civil rights movement really began to take off nationally and so forth. And we had the 60s, the sort of culminating in the March on Washington and so forth. Then things changed after the victories of the 64 Civil Rights Bill and so forth. And we introduced this bizarre idea that had never been there before, Blackness. All of a sudden, Blackness was something. We embraced, and I thought, well, this is wonderful. We're no longer ashamed of our race. We're now proud of our race. So I went through that whole phase of being proud of blackness and so I had a big afro and I did the whole thing. Came to eventually, not pretty quickly realize that was a delusion. So your race is a nice thing, and it's horrible if somebody oppresses you for it, and you want to fight to get that over with. But your race isn't going to make you anything. It's just the color of your skin. It is in itself. Doesn't amount to much. Whiteness is not something white people are going to be able to sort of squeeze. It's not a talent. It's it's an advantage, or has been in the past. We as blacks, it's the same thing. What we have been avoiding. We keep thinking some collective identity is going to be what moves us ahead. What moves us ahead is, as Ralph Ellison said, us becoming individuals, making a life for ourselves, developing our talents, competing with people with all other peoples, to be excellent at things, to be competitive, to join the world, not resist it. So today that's what the challenges are for young blacks. It's not to go out and demonstrate and protest. That's already been done. That has won for us everything it's going to win. The thing is now is much more boring and maybe more difficult. And that's to develop yourself. Find out what you love in life. Make a life out of it. Work hard at it. Sacrifice for it. Love your children. Encourage them in a positive way to be all they can be, not as blacks, but as individual human beings, as American citizens. I want now my society to judge me not as a black, but as a citizen. I'm a citizen like all others. Same rights, same challenges. That's the collective identity I want to be a part of. My blackness is my business. If it can enrich me, and it does in many, many ways. I've studied, taught Black American culture all my life, written, published about it, am informed by it. The great writers and thinkers that I admire are people like Ralph Ellison, and so even Mr. Baldwin and any number of others who've taught me enormously. I've benefited from Black culture. Many whites have too. It's a wide open world, in other words. And again, it's this as Ellison puts it, the group is the gift of all its individuals. And I think that we're ready for that now in Black America. What we need is your individuality. We don't need your blackness. We already got it. We're gonna live and die with that. We need your individuality, your talents, your special, your self-development. That's what we need. And we've got to stop thinking that we're systemic racism. Whenever you hear that, it's an avoidance. It's an avoidance from developing the self. Look back at thyself, and that's where freedom and opportunity really is.
Well, sir, I appreciate you coming on and giving us your perceptions and your take on how we should view this that's going on in our country right now. Certainly, we're coming up just 13 days away from an election. Many people will be voting, whether they vote for the current president or for Joe Biden. It really does not stop Black Americans from recognizing that we have a need in our country, and that's to see ourselves not as victims, but as victors. As one African president once told me, many people see us as being modern day Josephs who have helped build this global economy that we enjoy today. And I think you've just reminded me of that in so many ways. And the beauty of all this is that because of all the people that you've grown up with and people that you've worked with from different sides of the aisle, whether they're Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative or free thinkers, it's important that we have these kinds of conversations, not only about Michael Brown and not only about the deaths that have taken place, but also about the life that we're still living in order to become that more perfect union, black, white, brown, yellow, uh, one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. And I appreciate you being able to zero in on that each and every time you've written something or produced a film. You make us think. And for that, I thank you for coming on to have a thought-provoking conversation.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's a kind of conversation that makes me happy. I have a lot of faith, and I love Black people. I have a lot of faith. I know it. I know who we're strong. We are very strong, and we've overcome things no other group of human beings has ever overcome. And we will continue to do that. We get lost like everybody gets lost.
Yeah.
But we'll be found. Already there are signs even today that we're finding a new political voice in Black America, let's say, however you want to label it, conservative or whatever, it's a new voice. It's a voice I like very much. I think the future, it's the future of our future is the future of the Black individual. And I look forward to that day. And I'm sure we'll get there.
I look forward to having you on anytime to talk about where we are. And I appreciate your insights into America and being bold enough and courageous enough to express your view and your perceptions. And certainly that's appreciated here in this program where we have dialogue with everybody from every walk of life and different persuasions. But at the end of the day, it's because we love our country and we love our people.
Yes.
Shelby Steele.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. We'll be back with more after this. And welcome back. I'd like to thank all of my guests for appearing on tonight's program, Attorney Mark Harris, Dr. Benjamin Chavis, and Shelby Steele. And I thank each and every one of you for taking the time out to watch. I appreciate you. In closing, my final word is this. No matter what we're going through, keep your dream alive. Keep pursuing it. And let's keep being righted, united and ignited to spread love, freedom, and peace. Good night.
The color of light isn't red, black, or white, but it's crimson. We all bleed the same. If you don't feel the groove, it's all right. Just give it time, give it time. Come on, y'all. Get on board. Mankind won't survive if our hearts beat inside a hateful rhythm. You see, love isn't bought, but comes with a price.